Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. I just want to clarify, since we've got some more attendees, I want to make sure that you can see the screen that says Introduction to Grants, also that you can hear me or see the interpreter and or the closed caption. Please let me know in the chat box if you are missing any of the pieces or if you have any questions so far. All right, it is 7 o'clock, so we are going to get started. Welcome to the Introduction to Grants webinar. My name is Courtney Harge, and I'm the member advisor for Fractured Atlas. Tonight, we are using Caption Access to provide attendees with closed captions and Video Remote American Sign Language Interpretation, or VRI. This is a part of our effort to better serve deaf and hard of hearing artists and the disability community at large. Tonight, our ASL interpreter is Crystal Kramer, an RID certified interpreter, and our captioner is Beth Frazier. If you have any questions about Fractured Atlas's accessibility work, please feel free to contact us after the webinar. Additionally, this webinar is going to be recorded and will be posted on our website for later access. If at any time there's an audio or video issue, please use the webinar chat functionality to message me, and we will do what we can to troubleshoot the problem. We will send you a link to the recording by early next week, and there will be an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to chat questions throughout. If it's relevant, I will answer as I go, otherwise we'll save it for later. Before we get much further, I'd like to say that it's nice to meet all of you, even in this digital setting. A little bit about myself. My name, as I said, is Courtney Harge, and I'm a theater producer and director when I'm not working at Fractured Atlas. I work with a team of 12 artists and arts administrators who serve almost 75,000 members internationally. This includes around 4,200 fiscally sponsored projects, which includes individual artists, organizations, or just one-off projects. Since 2002, we've helped artists raise over $154 million, a little more than $23 million of which was in the last 12 months alone. In tonight's webinar, we are going to answer the following questions. What is a grant? It helps to start with the basics, and before you start looking for grants, it's important to know the role that grant making plays in the nonprofit sector. Grant readiness. Am I ready to apply for grants? There are I's to dot and T's to cross before you're truly a competitive grant seeker. How do I find grants that are right for me? What do I need to do to prepare when I'm working on a grant application? And how do I work with Fractured Atlas when submitting a grant proposal? As you probably already know, with fiscal sponsorship, Fractured Atlas extends some of the benefits of our 501c3 status to artists, arts projects, and arts organizations in order to open the doors to funding opportunities that they are not otherwise eligible for on their own. Most arts funding in the United States comes from individual donors, and our fiscal sponsorship program enables you to solicit tax-deductible donations from individuals. But it can also make you eligible for certain grant opportunities. In this breakdown, you'll see that 59% of contributed revenue for our fiscally sponsored projects comes from individual donors. This is largely true for any other arts nonprofit across the United States. But in today's webinar, we'll be talking about how to access the remaining 41% of contributed revenue, which comes in the form of funding from institutions, otherwise known as grants. So, to begin, what is a grant? Charitably inclined individuals and families, as well as corporations, often want to give back to their communities or financially support causes that are dear to them. To do so, they sometimes form a foundation, a separate legal entity, and endow it with their funds to be donated in the form of a grant. These grants then go to support projects or organizations that align with the interests of the funders. Because there are tax incentives for the individuals and corporations that want to form foundations, the IRS oversees their giving activities. Grants from a foundation must be made for charitable purposes within specific guidelines, often outlined in the foundation's charter that is filed with the IRS. Grants can also be awarded by local, state, or federal government entities. Some grants can be made to individuals, but most are only available to organizations who have received 501c3 tax-exempt status from the IRS. Foundations can award their grants in two different ways. Competitive, which is where foundations award grants as a result of an application process, where they accept submissions and decide how to allocate funds among the best applicants. And discretionary, where foundations can award grants just on a discretionary basis, meaning that they likely do not accept unsolicited submissions, but that individuals, projects, and/or organizations are selected and funded at the behest of the foundation decision makers, usually their board of directors or trustees. Grant funding is limited and competitive, regardless of how the grant is being solicited. The lion's share of contributed revenue for arts organizations in the United States comes from individual donors. So we strongly encourage artists to prioritize individual giving when creating a fundraising plan for their project or company. Before you spend time writing grant proposals, you need to determine your grant readiness. Grant readiness describes your level of preparedness to pitch yourself, your project, or your company as competent and successful enough to warrant consideration by a foundation. There certainly are grants out there for seed money and emergency grants for artists and organizations who are in a pinch. But the vast majority of opportunities are for grant seekers who are already on their feet, have a proven track record of success, are fiscally solvent, and are already making an impact in their field or discipline. When our fiscally sponsored projects want to apply for grants, we require that they clear a quick eligibility hurdle where we ask they have raised at least $1,000 from other sources first. This eligibility requirement is based on feedback from grant makers who are largely uninterested in awarding grants to artists and arts organizations who do not have existing revenue streams or committed support from their community or other stakeholders. We also advise you to have a body of work under your belt before you consider applying to foundations for grants. Likely they want to see a track record of at least 2 years' success before they will find you a competitive candidate for funding. When a funder is evaluating whether or not they want to award you a grant, they want to ensure that their funds are being used as effectively and as efficiently as possible. They are unlikely to fund projects where their grant represents a significant portion of the total project budget. It's also important to note that grant funding often has a longer fuse than individual giving. When you submit a grant proposal, you might not hear back with the foundation's decision for several months, and it might be even longer for them to cut you a check. So this is all a long way of saying that you must not look to grants as your primary source of contributed income to meet immediately pressing needs. Let's revisit this breakdown of contributed revenue for our sponsored projects. You should expect around or at least 59% of your contributed income to come from individual donors, and this is what you should use to meet your pressing needs. The primary goal of institutional funders is not to fill your budget shortfalls. Rather, they want to award grants that will amplify and improve the awesome work that you're already doing. To help illustrate these points, let's talk through a checklist that you might want to go through to evaluate your grant readiness. Again, this is about being able to sell yourself as competent and successful so that a funder trusts you to put their grant to its best use. First is our grant eligibility requirement. Have I raised at least $1,000 within the last 2 years for the work that I'm seeking funding for? What's more, do I have diverse revenue streams, donations, in-kind support, ticket sales, merchandise sales, etc., and a plan for maintaining those over the long haul? And even further, do I have a detailed budget for my project or company that outlines both my planned income and expenditures? Many projects or companies, especially those that are new or small, have an off-the-cuff approach to their finances and do not have long-term or even mid-term projections for where they are heading and how they plan to get there. If this describes you, then you're probably not yet ready to apply for grants. Have I been in operation for at least 2 years? This is a great question to help grantors understand your success. If this is a brand new project, it is less likely to get funded. Can I point to a body of work that demonstrates my track record? And do I have evidence that documents that previous work? For example, photos from your past productions, an active website or an engaging social media presence, sample marketing materials, testimonials from people who have experienced your work. Even though we only require that our fiscally sponsored projects raise at least $1,000 before we're eligible to apply for grants, we would argue that there's a difference between eligibility and competitiveness. Only if you can answer yes to all 6 of these questions on this checklist should you consider yourself a truly competitive grant seeker. Finding grants. Once we've determined our readiness as a grant seeker, we can start looking for appropriate grants for which we might be a good fit. Let's talk through a few recommended resources. Fortunately, Fractured Atlas can give you a leg up in identifying funders who might be appropriate for your project or company. We've developed a grant toolkit that we customize for our fiscally sponsored projects. All you need to do is email us to request a toolkit and quickly remind us of your artistic discipline, for example, theater, film, visual arts, etc., and the geographic area in which you operate. Within 2 weeks, we will prepare a toolkit for you that includes a list of funders for you to research further. In addition to our grant toolkit, we regularly post upcoming grant deadlines to our blog, and this list goes out in our monthly fiscal sponsorship newsletter. The toolkit also contains some great educational resources for prospecting grant makers. The list of funders that we provide is by no means an exhaustive list, and you will need to do some detective work to determine which prospects on the list are truly perfect fits for your project, so there's no substitute for you doing your own research. Let's quickly talk through how you'd go about doing this. One go-to resource that you should immediately investigate is your local arts council. Most cities or counties will have an arts council that might be a funding organization that you can apply to for grants, but it will likely also be a wealth of knowledge for artists and arts organizations in your area. Your local arts council might have some good leads for other grant makers that you should check out. Beyond that, there are a couple of great online resources that we strongly recommend you use. First, the Foundation Center. They are an online database of funders in all fields and disciplines internationally. You need to pay a fee in order to access their online listings, but they also have an in-person library location where you can go to search the database for free. Their official locations are in just a few cities across the United States, like New York, but they also partner with several local libraries and community centers in their funding information network. You can visit these partner organizations and also search the listings for free. Take a look at the Foundation Center website for more information. They also provide great educational resources, both webinars and in-person training sessions. Using the Foundation Center, you can do a customizable search of foundation using a lot of different criteria. For example, what geographic areas do they fund projects in? What artistic disciplines are they interested in? Do they accept unsolicited proposals? Most grant makers have profiles on the Foundation Center's website. Many profiles contain a wealth of information that you can use to determine if the funder is a good fit. You can also find a list of staff or board members at the foundation to see if you know any of them personally, or if you're a few degrees of separation away from them and can hopefully reach out to them through mutual contacts. Another online resource that we recommend is NIFA by the New York Foundation for the Arts. Here you'll find a listing of not only grants, but also job postings, fellowships, and other services for artists. It's not just for New York-based artists. The opportunities posted here are nationwide and are free to access. Finally, I recommend looking at other artists and arts organizations in your community. Check out their websites, newsletters, playbills, etc. to see if they're getting any grants and add these to your lists of funders to do some research on. So once you've used some combination of our grant toolkit, blog, local arts councils, the Foundation Center, NIFA source, and maybe even some light Googling, you'll probably have arrived at a fairly long list of potential funders to do further research on. Your work does not end here. I cannot emphasize enough. Once you've arrived at a list of prospects, you should not send them a blanket solicitation letter. Instead, you need to pare this list down further to find the handful of funders for which you are truly a competitive fit. So what do you do next? First off, check out the funder's website. If there's a formal application process, you'll find guidelines there. According to the Foundation Center, however, around 90% of funders do not have websites. So what do you do then? There's another great online resource that is totally free. It's called GuideStar. All United States foundations and nonprofit organizations, like Fractured Atlas, have profiles on GuideStar. A foundation's profile will include their recent 990s. A 990 being the tax form that foundation and nonprofits need to file with the IRS each year. A funder's 990 is not the most exciting document in the world, to be sure. But if you learn to read between the lines, you can find a lot of information that can help you determine if a foundation is a good fit for you. When I'm looking at a 990, one of the first things I do is scroll to Part 15, or XV, where you can learn more about how a grant maker accepts applications. This is especially useful if the foundation does not have a website with info about how to submit. Sometimes the 990 will include a description of the types of requests that they fund, what to send the funder, any supplemental documentation to provide with your submission, and the contact information for the person to whom your request should be addressed. But most importantly, Part 15 asks a crucial question to which you should pay special attention. Check here if the foundation only makes contributions to pre-selected charitable organizations and does not accept unsolicited requests for funds. If the foundation has this box checked off, then there are two things you can do. Maybe you decide to cross this funder off of your list of prospects as they do not offer a competitive funding opportunity, or you can see if there's a way to make it onto their list of pre-selected charitable organizations. On the 990, you'll be able to see who else received an award from the funder that year, so pay careful attention to that, especially the award amounts. When you look at who received funding from a given grantor, you can also see the size of the grant that they were awarded. You'll have a sense for the range of award amounts that a funder offers. This can serve a couple of purposes. First off, it will continue to help you evaluate your competitiveness for a given foundation. If they only offer grants of $100,000 or more, and your total budget is only $10,000, then they're not right for you until you become a much bigger enterprise. Also, it will help you come up with an appropriate ask amount if you ultimately do decide to submit a proposal. It stands to reason that if a foundation only awards grants of $5,000 or less, you shouldn't ask for more than that when you send your proposal. Find out who works for the foundation and who is on their board of directors. Part 8 of the 990 will list the highest paid employees at the foundation, if applicable, as well as the members of their board of directors. If the funder states that they only support pre-selected organizations, you can take a look at this list of names, share it with your inner circle, and see if anyone that you know is friendly with a member of their board and can facilitate an introduction. You could see also if there's any contact info whatsoever, like a phone number or email address, and try to connect with someone at the foundation to gather more details. A former director of development at Fractured Atlas, someone who has raised tens of millions of dollars for major cultural institutions in New York City, has said that she has only been successful at being awarded a grant when she's been able to make a personal contact with the funder before submitting a formal proposal. She's probably exaggerating slightly, but it's important to remember that successful fundraising is about relationship building. You're more likely to be awarded a grant if you've worked on cultivating a relationship with the funder before you even ask them for money. If you've done your homework, you'll have completed your due diligence for being a responsible grant seeker. Remember, the goal of this research is to give you the info that you need to be able to make a good call for whether or not you're an appropriate fit for a given funder's mission. So what are the key pieces of information that you want to take away from your research of a given funder? I hope you'll indulge me in one more checklist. Do they have an open, competitive application process, or do they only award discretionary funding? Do they fund projects or companies like mine in my geographic area? Do they have any upcoming deadlines? What documentation do they need from me and or from my fiscal sponsor? For that matter, do they even fund fiscally sponsored projects? Some funders do not award grants to fiscally sponsored projects, most notably the National Endowment for the Arts. Is there someone at the foundation that I can contact to learn more about their funding priorities? Ultimately, All of this research is getting back to learning more about the funder's mission and priorities. You should only apply to a given foundation if their goals align with your project's or company's goals. Don't stretch your mission or activities to match a funding opportunity. For example, if a grant maker funds teaching artist programs, it's not a great idea to add a teaching artist program to your activities just to be eligible to apply for this grant, especially if it's not relevant to your mission or your other programming. By the same token, funders can tell when you're sending a blanket letter to lots of different grant makers. We strongly discourage you from doing this. Unlike individual giving, grant seeking is not a numbers game. It's not true that the more proposals you send out, the more grants you will be awarded. Foundations also are in regular contact with each other at conferences and other networking events, and they usually talk about applicants who have submitted proposals to them. So it won't do you any favors to submit proposals to foundations that are not appropriate fits. If you're ultimately unable to glean any useful info from their website, their 990, or a contact at the funder, then it's almost certainly not a good use of your time to submit a proposal to them, and you should, with no reservations, cross this foundation off your list. Hopefully, however, this research will have led you to the small handful of grant opportunities that are perfect for your work. Once you've found some good prospects, it's time to start writing your submission. First, it's important to determine if you're preparing a letter of inquiry, LOI, or a full proposal. The funder's website, their 990, or your conversation with the foundation staff should help you figure out what to work on. An LOI is a brief written request for funding consideration. Sometimes this is the only part of the application process, but often it's just the first step. In the LOI, you're usually asking for an invitation to submit a full proposal that goes into more detail on your funding needs. To that extent, the LOI is a mini version of the longer proposal. Unless the funder explicitly states otherwise, your LOI should be about 2 to 3 pages in length. Here are the things that you need to consider putting in both the LOI in abbreviated form and a longer proposal. An executive level project summary that articulates your goals and what is being requested of the funder. Be sure to have a specific ask amount in mind for a given funder and be able to articulate it clearly in your submission. Keep in mind that your ask amount should represent a relatively small portion of your total project or company budget. How much to request can vary depending on a specific funder's guidelines, but we generally recommend that you limit your ask amount to less than 25% of your project budget, and if possible, to less than 10% of your project budget if you can. A needs statement that demonstrates that your project or company is playing a vital role in solving a problem or addressing an issue in your field of interest. You're offering the funder the chance to be a part of the novel solution that you're proposing. This is a great opportunity to really pitch for the impact that you have. A narrative that tells the story of who, what, where, when, how, and why. Here's where you make the case that what you're doing is innovative and worthy of support. You talk about who you're serving and how you're going to accomplish your mission. An outline of the specific outcomes that you're trying to achieve. As a result of the work that you're doing, what do you hope will happen with your company, with your discipline, or with your community? And also, how do you plan to measure these outcomes? How will you know that you've been successful? Your qualifications. Why are you and or your team the right people for this job? Your budget. In an LOI, you might not be required to submit a separate budget document, but you should have one prepared regardless. Even in an LOI, you still want to indicate your total project or company budget and how much you've raised for the work so far, so that the funder has an idea of how their grant would fit into your overall fundraising plan. We fortunately have a separate webinar for budgets, but we encourage you to check it out. In a grant application budget, you would want to include a thorough list of your expenses, but also an outline of all of your sources of revenue, both committed and pending. These are just general guidelines for either an LOI or a full proposal. Defer to the Foundation's guidelines whenever possible, and follow them to the letter. Beyond that, make sure that the little details, formatting, spelling, etc., are spot on before submitting. Fortunately, if you're fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, you'll have a second set of experienced eyes reviewing your grant applications before they are submitted to provide feedback. As with all fundraising materials, grant applications from our fiscally sponsored projects need to be reviewed and approved by a Fractured Atlas staff member before they are submitted to the funder. With certain applications, it's possible that Fractured Atlas will need to submit them on your behalf. For grant makers that accept online applications, we may need to set up login credentials for you in order to be able to submit. In any case, you can email us about grant opportunities or proposals that you're working on at support@fracturedatlas.org. For grant applications, we ask for 10 business days to review and approve your materials. This allows us to take a deep dive on your proposal and also thoroughly research the funder. If applicable, we will provide feedback that will hopefully help maximize the competitiveness of your submission. If you need us to expedite a review of a grant application, we often need to charge a $75 rush fee. As you research funders, we encourage you to keep a grants calendar where you mark grant deadlines and also write in the Fractured Atlas deadline for 10 business days prior to when the completed applications are due. Most grant applications will require some kind of documentation from Fractured Atlas, like a sponsorship confirmation letter from us, or IRS determination letter, R990, audited financials, board list, and more. The 10 business day window allows us the time to gather these materials. When we review your grant applications, we will be looking to see that you've included our required standard text for grants. This is a one-paragraph summary of the fiscal sponsorship arrangement and can be found in a few different places on our website, in the program guidelines on your My Fiscal Sponsorship page and in the knowledge base. If and when you're awarded a grant, it's likely that there will be a contract involved. Fractured Atlas may need to sign it on your behalf, or you may be able to sign it on your own, or some combination of the two. So we may need you to expect to work with us on the completion of the contract. One common contractual requirement is that many funders ask for reports on how their funds are being used. Sometimes it will just be a single final report. Sometimes it will be one or more reports. We'll set up automated reminders in our system to ping you when the reports are due. And as with other grant materials, we ask that you send your grant reports to us for review before they are submitted to the funder. Okay, we've reached the end. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'm going to open up for questions shortly. Before I do, I just wanted to quickly plug our other webinars. This is just one in a series. You can find upcoming presentations listed on our website and also recordings of past webinars in the knowledge base. We hope this material was useful to you, and now I'm ready to take any questions. I'm also going to open it up for questions that you can submit online if you wish. So feel free to chat questions, or you can send them to the Google link that I just submitted in the chat box. Are there any questions? I see one question is this, somebody joined late, and so they want to know how we can view. This webinar is recorded, so there will be a recording sent out to you by the beginning of next week. Okay, I see we have a few questions. Fantastic. So are there any fees for the preparation of the reports that may be required? No, there are no fees. The more time you can give us, the better. And ultimately, the project is preparing project is preparing the reports. So it's just important that you plan for your time. We can review, there may be back and forth, but ultimately it is up to the project to provide the finished report, and then we can offer feedback as necessary. Please address the difference between individual artists and organizations, what different databases at the Foundation Center, etc. So the simple answer to that question is that each funder has different requirements. So funders sometimes can award things to an individual artist, which means they can release the funds to somebody with just a social security number. Other times they need an organization to be tax exempt to receive the funds. And that is dependent on each individual foundation's charter and how they are legally set up to distribute funds. At the Foundation Center, there are a variety of databases, but they have librarians or people who can assist and really help you find the right database for them to use. But what you're looking for is a grant makers database. You want to see who is offering grants that you could feasibly apply to. Is it necessary to give a heads up about MAP Fund now that they don't require you to make the login? Yes, we still require that you give us a heads up. Our blog, which is blog.fracturedatlas.org, has a blog post specifically about MAP Fund and our requirements for that grant application. What other webinars pair well with this one? All of them, frankly. The best way to get to know about how Fractured Atlas works is to read through our knowledge base, is to ask us specific questions. All of our webinars provide an overview of a specific type of fundraising or a type of service. So take a second to go through our knowledge base and find some webinars and see if you can view some past ones. Because all of them speak to each other in the sense of being able to fundraise. Somebody wants a broad overview of our services at Fractured Atlas. Our website is actually the best place to provide for that. We have 4 major programs: Fiscal Sponsorship, which is the funding tool for artists; our insurance program, which allows artists to purchase insurance to protect themselves, their equipment, their property; Space Finder, which connects venues with artists and vice versa, and Artfully, which does ticketing and customer relationship management. The next question is about corporate sponsorships. How do we find those? There actually is a specific corporate sponsorship webinar on our website. They can look a lot like grants, but corporate sponsorships primarily are about marketing. The corporate sponsor wants to know what audience you're working with, and if it's the audience they're trying to connect with, and they want to know how many people you're serving, where you're serving them, what type of work you're doing. And that's covered a bit more in our corporate sponsorship webinar. I have also in the chat box sent a link to the Fractured Atlas blog, which has the information about MAP Fund and also our grant deadlines. So if there's information you would like, that is the great place to get them. Are there any other questions? So one question was, are there suggestions for audience demographic surveys that could help with reports or sponsorship? The National Arts Marketing Project may have some resources for you. You can also look at local census data or government data based on where you are. You can also develop your own survey for your audiences. There is a lot of information out there. I know the Wallace Foundation does a lot of information about audiences and about communities. So that may give you a space to start. You can find previous webinars in our knowledge base. So if you go to fracturedatlas.org and go to help, there's a link that says knowledge base, and that has a link to a variety of articles about using Fractured Atlas, including past webinars. Let's see. I see a few people have said that they've come in late, and that's fine. This will be recorded and will be available on our website. We will also be sending the recording to you all via email by the beginning of next week. Yes, the VRI does show up in the recording. Are there any other questions? Again, I see the question that the VRI will be attached to the video. The interpreter is Crystal Kramer, and her video will be attached to the recording of this webinar. Is there anything else I can offer anyone? Any additional questions? You can always email us at support, SUPPORT, at fracturedatlas.org if you have anything you want to follow up with. Well, thank you all again for spending your Tuesday evening with us. Really appreciate it. And if there's something that you wish to follow up with, again, always happy to receive emails, support@fracturedatlas.org, or reach out to us and check out our other webinars. Thank you all and have a great evening.